Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised,
I have ordered attacks on enemy military.
Air war is going on over Baghdad.
You actively fly in the Navy for about 20 years' time, and after that you end up, like I did, ultimately going and getting commands of ships. Or as the saying sometimes is, you get command of an LMD, that's called a low mahogany desk. My name is Herb Zoehrer, retired as a captain in 1981 after a total of 35 years of wearing a uniform. Now, the Navy has lots of different forms of training, and there's one called Dilbert Dunker training. What it is the cockpit of an aircraft near a swimming pool that is running down or let fly down into the water at about a 45-degree angle, and as it hits the water, it inverts. The idea being, if you ever experience this for real, this is a way to train, understand what happens, unseat yourself from the seat belt that you're wearing, and safely evacuate the aircraft. So when it happened for real, it was, hey, I've been here before, no big deal. In November of 1954, I took a catapult shot from the starboard catapult of the Kula Gulf, and not enough force was applied. The catapult malfunctioned, and I ended up in the water after the shortest flight of my career, all of about 10 or 15 seconds. After hitting the water, obviously there's an adrenaline level that pumps up, but it came to my mind, let it settle out, then reach down, release your seat belt, throw off your shoulder harness, and only then get out of the cockpit. I had 2 crewmen in the back end, and we all 3 were safely rescued, no injuries. That cold cat shot was the distinction of the last VS-31 carrier launch of an AF aircraft. And the last sentence in the accident report was, Dilbert Dunker training proved invaluable. This is the type helicopter that rescued me and my 2 crewmen in November of 1954 after our cold catapult shot from the carrier USS Kula Gulf. I have an affinity for this particular type aircraft.
good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. To halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. All ships of any kind bound for Cuba, where they're found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back.
The Cuban Missile Crisis was a very short, intense period, something that could have resulted in disaster. We knew that there were photographs taken proving that, in fact, that there were missiles aboard Cuba, and we're generally aware of what was happening in Washington with President Kennedy, and we were photographing and keeping track of all of the Soviet vessels that were supplying missiles and aircraft to Cuba. My mission and all the flying I did off carriers was anti-submarine warfare. One of the aircraft in the squadron that I flew with detected a snorkeling submarine. Soviet submarine, Foxtrot class, diesel-powered. That visual contact was made close enough to the carrier, I'd say only 15 miles or so away, but helos from the helo squadrons arrive very quickly. The destroyers at 20, 25 knots can get there in a hurry. And with those forces, in coordinated methods, we continued maintaining on that Soviet submarine contact for what ended up about 2.5 days, which at the end of, he finally surfaced, having depleted his battery capacity and had to surface. At that point, he took up a course of 090 to the east. We followed him for a while, but he got himself well out of the area, and we figured that's the end of that contact. It was a little bit of a knuckle-tight situation that could have turned bad, ended up with a quid pro quo, their missiles removed and some of our missiles removed from Turkey. We learned subsequently there were 4 of that class submarines, and all of those 4 Foxtrot submarines had 1 nuclear-armed torpedo aboard. It leaves a lesson that we damn better always be ready, but still know how to talk.